Chair Evans, Chair Gamble, Chair Parker, Chair Sepulveda, Chairwoman Stiles, and Chair Wiener all here. I understand Pro Tem Suara is on her way, and Councilman Bradford had another commitment today. So we will just go ahead and jump right into our agenda. I want to again congratulate Councilwoman Gamble on her recent election and then joining us. So I'm glad we were, from a timing perspective, able to kind of wait and have this first meeting once you were seated in your chairmanship. So congrats to you. So colleagues, just by way of kind of intro and get started, I'm just going to do kind of a brief chair report just to kind of catch you up on kind of what I have been up to that I think kind of relates to the legislative work that we do. We have obviously had our orientation. We're going to talk a little bit further down the agenda about feedback on that, but we do still have a lot of things ongoing, with the thought being that, you know, the orientation does not have to be the be-all to end all. So tomorrow we have a Libraries 101. We have with Mr. Will Dodd at Codes. I think Mr. Dodd does a great job. He's got kind of a Codes 201 tomorrow. So throughout the fall and into the winter, we're still going to keep kind of doing those kind of informational sessions. And so I welcome y'all's feedback on that, and we're going to kind of see if we're going to formalize a way for council members to give us that feedback. Thank you so much, Ms. Hayes. I appreciate it. Thank you. I have reached out and met with Mr. Jenkins at the Tennessee Municipal League. I am trying to kind of get around and just kind of getting started on meeting with folks with our Davidson County delegation, and as well other representatives within Middle Tennessee. Just to keep kind of building those relationships and just introduce myself and get to know a little bit about them. I just on Friday had a meeting with School Board Chair Rachel Ann Elrod to speak with her about kind of what we're going to be doing going forward in partnership with the school board. And then as well, I think with staff, we've just been working on some kind of, you know, tech updates and things in the chamber, and kind of optimizing some of our screens and queuing and some of the information that the body has received about how to vote and so forth. So just kind of doing some little tech updates and things. I appreciate Mr. Clark helping get our queue clearing process figured out. And so, yeah, so with that, that's just a little bit of an update from me. And then kind of when we get to the end of the agenda, if there's anything else y'all have to ask or want to ask me that I've not covered, you are welcome to ask me that. So just for the public's edification, the executive committee is comprised of all the chairs of our standing committees, or at this juncture our proposed standing committees, because I have appointed you all in a way that is a little bit different from the standing committees we had last term, but that was also different from what we had before that. So iteratively we have been consolidating some of that, but for this term, as you all can see, there is no one in chairmanship this first year that is a new member. So I do very much value y'all's kind of institutional memory, right, and that you're returning to service. And so with that, from an expectation standpoint, I did want y'all to be aware, not just kind of at the end of things, but I would like you all to prepare a transition memo kind of for whomever will follow you, if that is next year or in 2 years, just depending on kind of what is before your committee and in progress, right? So I'm not going to make a upfront, it's 1 year, it's 2 year. I think that's somewhat of a collaborative conversation based on kind of what you're working on in committee and what you kind of see coming down the pike. But I would just encourage you, whether, don't let the year kind of get too far away from you, but it's just like if you were entering into chairmanship thinking from perspective of a new member, what would you want those folks to know? Because I've talked a lot and with a lot of you all about kind of holding these through lines, right, from year to year and term to term, and especially in the context of the pandemic. 3 mayoral administrations, multiple departmental leadership, and NDOT, for example. Some of these things don't necessarily get resolved in committee, and so we need to kind of keep circling back to them and happily finding out. Often they are absolutely being addressed, but it's just if we don't kind of come back and circle and communicate with our members and let folks know and let the public know. So I'm really looking to you as chairs, and the reason you are appointed into these positions is that you are knowledgeable in this space, you've served here before, and so, our new members are just kind of getting their legs underneath each other, or themselves rather. Okay, that's an outtake. Anyway, their legs underneath themselves for this new job, figuring out what their inbox looks like, figuring out what that department, y'all are a resource to your members on the committee, and so a little bit of my expectation is around kind of narrating the work and contextualizing it a little bit, like remembering that there are people sitting in the room with you that they just showed up, right? And so you may know, 2 or 3 years ago, that thing happened, whatever. I mean, you don't have to go all the way down the rabbit hole and way back, but that's helpful for the public, and that is helpful for new members. So I don't want us to be in a space of, we're just moving the legislation through, for new members, aerial encroachments, just, maybe 2-3 minutes from staff about, why we do aerial encroachments. That's going to be redundant for some members in the body, but just some of those things that kind of, why do we do this? Why do we see this? This is, just sort of bringing some of that context, and maybe your members will do that on committee, but if they don't, the onus is on you to kind of go back and pull in that context and kind of narrate that a little bit. So, think about if you're a community member and you care about infrastructure or sidewalks or boards and commissions or public safety, or, you've heard about the SRO issue, and, so you're just now tuning in. I do want us to kind of show the work a little bit more in committee, and with that comes kind of a little bit more of kind of narrating and contextualizing in your chairmanship, and then also kind of setting the expectation for departments that when they show up, like a Mr. Purvis, who is very kindly here today, but anticipating the questions and where maybe some of the pitfalls are for any particular piece of legislation. Certainly be in collaboration as chair with that department, have that conversation. Here's what I anticipate would be the questions. Here's some information that I think would be helpful. But that said, and I will convey this to departments as well, and as I've met with them, it's a mutual relationship, but the onus is on them to anticipate that, right? So, we have a deferral for a reason. We can use that in committee. If you as chair don't feel like questions are being appropriately addressed, feel free to suggest that deferral. I would entertain a motion for deferral. Like it seems like there's still some questions. So let's use that deferral in committee and really bring those questions into committee and facilitate a good constructive conversation in committee. Okay. Alrighty, speaking of, so that's kind of on expectations. Is there anything that you all want to share just from your perspective thus far, or any questions you have for me just as far as chairmanship goes? Don't want to put you on the spot. We can, yeah.
Just very briefly, I really appreciated the kind of additional context that the Public Safety Committee offered for members.
Yes.
I think it was the first meeting, just to kind of get folks oriented. I thought that was really great that y'all did that. I'm hoping to do a little bit more of that. We've kind of just had like an onslaught in transportation infrastructure of backlog of easements and whatnot to get through. So I know we have NDOT coming to our next meeting, which is super good to talk about some of the prioritization stuff. But hopefully we'll have a little bit of time and not have literally 30 minutes of reading captions for that next meeting. So I'll try to do some of that.
Yeah, and then I think just from a spacing standpoint and kind of getting that figured out, with us consolidating committees, the hope is to provide more space for the committee work. And I know we're still, again, kind of sussing that out. We are dealing with some backlogs, so that, but do appreciate y'all's feedback, whether to me or to staff, about like, did you have enough time to discuss the issues, and giving staff that feedback. Ms. Darby, it's Ms. Godin then that is assigning at this juncture from a time standpoint for committees.
She'll look through and see what the agenda looks like, or how many items are on an agenda, and then kind of estimate what it looks like, and then we'll talk about it.
And so, by rule, like the vice mayor delegates legislation to committee on staff. That is Danielle's role, Ms. Godin's role. And so, because she is kind of managing that legislative process when it comes through administratively, asking for your signatures and so forth, please do look at your administration legislation, get in front of that, ask for any backup that you need. And then, you having that conversation with Ms. Godin, like, hey, I remember this one. Can I see the attachments for that? That's a little bit of a preview to her, like, this is maybe gonna need a little more discussion, and you should feel free to convey that to her as well, right? And I think, over time we'll get our groove a little bit, but, we've all been there, like, oh, dang, we did not have enough time to discuss that, or actually we had plenty of time. So let's just make sure that there's kind of a mutual feedback loop there so that we can kind of optimize how we're spacing everything out so that we have enough time for that committee work. Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
absolutely.
I thought of a question.
Yes.
The one thing that we tried to do with the second meeting related to SROs was aggregate some more information for the analysis. So that way there'd be a little bit more that was kind of based on the questions, from the previous meeting. And I guess looking at the calendar, I see the deadline or when it's distributed, but I don't know when do you finalize it, or when is it finalized? Like if I'm trying to think of, let's include this extra information.
In the analysis, it's finalized that morning. So it goes out on Thursday around noon, 1 o'clock usually, and we are usually finalizing it up until right
until
before
you
it goes
distribute.
out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know over the years, based on conversation, and if something is deferred, I have touched base with staff around, like, I think this is helpful to the understanding, as far as the analysis goes. Yeah, and then I think too, from a timing perspective on committees, if you feel like, again, that there has been kind of insufficient conversation or a whole lot of questions have been elevated, again, deferring it, and then, whether in committee next time with certain questions or in a separate meeting, right? Like, is this something that has been elevated to a level that you need to have a bigger conversation? That's not to say we're not gonna have, debate on the floor, but kind of thinking about, is there, from your chairmanship perspective, something that's constructive, to either have that conversation in, a committee that's a little bit longer, so speaking with staff, like, we're gonna invite these two folks to discuss this. I anticipate that'll be half hour, so I'm gonna need 45 minutes. Hello, Chair Porterfield, come on in. So trying to get to a space where we can have that in committee rather than an extra meeting. Sometimes it will have to be an extra meeting, but let's just kind of see if we can get some more of that into committee, okay? And so to that end, y'all have seen the proposal for the standing committees that have been assigned, right? Y'all are here in your chairmanship of those. the biggest difference from last term is that what used to be ad hoc and then became formalized as a standing committee of affordable housing, I have proposed that go away. And to explain that, I would like to share that in conferring with the planning department and other folks in that space, that we have formalized the Division of Affordable Housing under the umbrella of the planning department. And thus, I think there is a logic then with Ms. Hubbard's group, Angie Hubbard, being under the planning department umbrella, that we're basically pulling affordable housing under that umbrella. That does not mean this council does not care about affordable housing. It just is putting that in a place where there's a good strategic alignment, because some of the redundancies that were kind of happening, and so I think, hello, Pro Tem, come on in, come on in. Let's see, do you want to be here, Ms. Evans? Okay, yeah. I can scooch to the right just a little bit as well. So some of the redundancies of, multiple referrals, that Affordable Housing Committee often did afford an opportunity to have some conversations, but it almost kind of was like a special meeting, right? Or it could have been a meeting of the committee rather than being a standing committee, in my view. And then additionally, when I met with staff, Ms. Godin, Ms. Darby, and we talked about kind of the legislative flow, right? Like what gets assigned to what committees and where do we have duplicity or, duplicative assignments for things, and looking at the Education Committee, that had virtually no legislation coming through it, and it was really historically charter school lease agreements. And so those can come through Budget and Finance, in my view. Chair Porterfield and I have had an opportunity to talk about that. But when I previewed that to members of the school board and kind of asked them kind of conceptually about that, what would they think about that, I did suggest that we look at, in Budget and Finance, at the chair's discretion, having somebody assigned to liaise to the school board and that school board budget chair, right? So that we can kind of get in front of that, be having preliminary conversations, because, again, making sure then that we have intention around the conversations that we have and how we're collaborating with the school board, but recognizing that we have a duly elected independent school board. And so this body cares very much about education. This body cares very much about affordable housing. We don't have to show that by having two standing committees that, are not really having much legislation coming through them. And I feel like we can optimize our existing committees and hold space for these conversations and be intentional about it. So, again, I have spoken with Chair Elrod and Frida Player-Peters, Jeannie Walker, former budget chairs, and just kind of, what could this look like? And so that we bring intention to that space in advance of budget season. But that sort of informs my proposal. And so that's why I put the committees together in the way that I did. It was not just like, oh, nothing comes from this committee, just exit off, right? I want you all to understand that there is real intention behind that, and there will be going forward as far as us being diligent about continuing to focus on those spaces, because obviously we as a body and our constituents care very much about those two spaces. But I don't think we have to demonstrate that care by just standing up these committees to obviate that. We should show that care and concern through the work that we do. right, okay. So, yes, and I think, let me just see, Madam Pro Tem, if there's anything else I wanted to explain by way of my proposal. Yeah, okay, I think that's everything from my perspective, and yes, absolutely invite discussion and questions.
Thank you, and I think that we've had this conversation privately, but I wanted to, I like the idea of condensing the committee. I like the idea that we're not having too many. I think it's good. The two that bothers me was affordable housing and education, but the part that I wanted to make sure that as we're thinking about the liaison between the school and the council is that I remember being education committee chair. One of the things that we do in that committee was not just approving those contracts only, but we had a structure where we wanted to make sure for the constituent, there's always a talk about accountability, that oftentimes we just give money to the school and we're not asking how they're doing, what they're doing with it. And so in the last year, during my term, what we did was actually invite members of the school board to our education committee meeting, and we were asking them specific questions about budget items. For example, the extra 21 million that we gave, how are they doing with that? We asked them about Glencliff being a dropout factory, what is leading to that? And so as we do this liaison thing, I know we're going to have one person doing it, but I hope there's opportunity, if needed, to be able to have, like, through the budget committee or through the liaison, however we structure it, to be able to have opportunity to have the school board come and answer to specific accountability question. For me, as we go around, I'll give every money to the school all the time. That's our biggest expense, and it can even get bigger, but people always ask, you guys just give it to them. You don't ask them any question outside of budget season. So I want to put that out there to the budget chair and to you as you're looking at the structure, that the ability to be able to have them respond to those specific accountability within programming or in money to this body. I would love that to be part of the conversation and part of the structure.
I appreciate that, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I want to add something to that, because I was sitting here wondering if there's not a sense prior to budget season starting that we have within budget and finance, we create a subcommittee that can parse these things out and then bring them to the whole committee and to the body. I think that might, because two heads are better than one. And so to that point, maybe a subcommittee might be something to consider.
I appreciate that. I definitely, I know in my chairmanship of what we used to call Public Works, when we had solid waste, recycle, I did put Berkeley Allen, who's very adept and knows that plan front and back, as a kind of subcommittee under what was a pretty big umbrella of Public Works. So I'm fully supportive of subcommittees, and I will take that under advisement. I am waiting, and it may be in my inbox right now, so excuse me, Pro Tem, that's actually why I was looking down at my phone, to get a proposal from Chair Elrod about kind of what this might look like, right? So that there's a mutuality there in how we can support and help each other to the end of, or the good of, making sure that budget's in a really good place. Because what I conveyed to Chair Elrod is sometimes I feel like subsequent to their budget process, council is kind of in the position of being like the villain or the hero, right? To kind of fully fund schools or fund this particular, and we just want to get in front of that and see if we can get that, formalized into the budget ahead of time. What are we missing? What do we need to know about? So I appreciate that, Chair Wiener, whether by subcommittee, a liaison, two liaisons, but I do want to defer to Chair Porterfield, wait to get that feedback from Ms. Elrod, and just kind of figure out, in discussions with anybody that cares about that. I'm not going to just kind of unilaterally make that decision, but I know that Chair Porterfield, having been on Education Committee and chair of that, and an educator herself, that she's going to have a lot of intention around that as well. So, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you for all your thought into this, and thank you, colleagues, for your great suggestions. And I'll say there's a lot of synergy. You all are kind of in our brains right now. And I had shared this with Vice Mayor before school board member, Anna Shepherd, passed away when she was still on the school board. And I was chair of the education committee. School board member Shepherd and I were in the talks of having standing meetings with the school board and the education committee, and the idea was that we wanted to make sure that the education committee was knowledgeable about the needs of the school district, so that it wasn't coming down to budget season and then all of a sudden you're hearing for the first time that MNPS needs more money for social emotional learning when you have no idea what social emotional learning is. So what we discussed was having some standing meetings between the two entities to make sure that the education committee was educated, so that, you know, they could kind of be liaisons and advocate for funding when it came down to the budget. And unfortunately, she passed away before we were able to really implement the vision the way that we had planned. Shared that information with Councilmember Druffel, who then went on to start putting some things in motion. Then Councilwoman Soror also, you know, had her vision. So all of these under the same vein. So under that same vein, like, it is my intention to make sure that our school board, whether we have a separate committee or whether that's just a part of the budget and finance, we're still working with MNPS to try to work out those details. But it is my intention to make sure that MNPS has the ability to come to the budget committee on a, you know, pretty regular basis. One, to be accountable for the huge line item that we are allocating to them, but also to make sure that people are understanding, you know, what their needs are, what their budget requests may be, and how we could better work together to make sure that they get the funding that they need, and that they're being, you know, fiscally responsible with the funding that we're allocating. So all that to say, it's all in the works, y'all, and we're trying to figure it out, but I appreciate those suggestions.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chair Porterfield. I appreciate that. And Ms. Stiles is stepping out there, but so I guess from just an order of operations, right? So the standing committees are in our rules. We are now operating under temporary rules that extend for 60 days. I know, and that'll come up really soon here on the agenda, but I know Chair Sepulveda has kind of met with staff anticipating what that kind of rules change and update process is going to look like. So what I am hoping for today and would entertain a motion is for the executive committee, so those of us in leadership of committees, to accept the proposal of the committees that I have put before you, and then it would be on rules then to formalize that, you know, this is the slate in the rules proposal, but that they then make to the body, right? So this is really only the first step, you know, so I will defer to Chair Sepulveda, but I think, you know, the intent is that these are the rules that we operate under for the next 4 years. That said, I know that this is, you know, a fairly significant change, but I do think we've been kind of in an iterative process, right, of consolidating our committees. We need to always be kind of evaluating that. I welcome the feedback. If we get feedback from, you know, the school board and otherwise, we can absolutely be back here having this conversation again. I think I would not like maybe us to put ourselves in the position of, like, every year we're doing something a little bit different, but I do want you to hear from me that I think this is an ongoing refinement process, and I welcome that feedback. So, you know, I think if we were to, you know, vote to kind of support this proposal, I would like it to be for this term. But then again, I am open to discussing it in the future if need be. So don't know if there is.
Make a motion.
Okay. Was there?
I was just gonna make a motion.
Dueling motions.
Go for it.
I move to accept the new committee structure for the 2023-2027 council term.
Second.
Thank you. And seconded. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That is unanimous. Ms. Darby, are you recording this? Okay. Thank you so much.
So the camera.
As is the camera, yes. That's what this is for. Okay, so moving on, colleagues, to the January 2nd meeting. The first meeting of January for this council will be on January 2nd. January 1st is a holiday, obviously. I think we have probably all felt over the course of, especially these last 4 years, just the every 2-week cadence of everything that we do with no breaks is particularly challenging. And so this calendar, I think, affords us an opportunity to sort of ask the question, like, okay, we don't want staff working over the holidays to file legislation around Christmas, or, is everybody going to be like flying back on New Year's Day to get here for the meeting of the 2nd? Are we going to compress all the committees? Like, I think the first meeting of January, even if the meeting's on the 3rd or the 4th or the 6th, or it is always going to present challenges, and I also feel that we do better work when we also kind of get to breathe and have a break every now and then. So we have been in touch with the planning department. So Chair Gamble, I know you'll be interested in this in particular, to ask, like, does this mess stuff up? What will this mean? And so as I have thought about it, and again, we can kind of entertain this in a variety of ways, but what I would suggest to you all is that basically the second meeting in January becomes the first meeting in January, and we can have a public hearing at that meeting. So that way everything does not get backlogged into February, and February just becomes some mega long meeting. Effectively, the first and only meeting of January is what would have been the second meeting of January. And it would be my proposal that we also do that for the entire term, right? So it's not just about this one time because it happened to fall on the 2nd, but it is also about giving staff, whether in the clerk's office or council, just some room to breathe there, and for us to kind of, as a body, have a little time to rejuvenate and breathe, because we are fairly unique in that first and third and first and third and first and third all the year round. And so, yeah. So
Is it early for a motion?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Your speech was lovely.
Me too.
Yes.
Sleeping bags for everybody in that meeting on January?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, it really, for the January meeting, it'll just kind of push whatever was going to have been in the planning cadence of approvals just to that second meeting. So it's not as though we're pushing it all to February, and I understand there could be some concern about that. Yes.
So what I said to Councilmember Evans when you started talking is that I like her. That's what we're chuckling about, because I do think it's working efficiently and giving our best to this position and to our constituents. And I think coming to a meeting on January 2nd where we have to have condensed committee and then the full body is not good for anybody, not the staff and not us. So thank you for your thoughts and leadership on that. I think it's a wonderful idea, and whoever wants to meet on January can have a party here by themselves.
Aaron will have more candy. Aaron's candy bowl will be chocolate.
Holiday dog. That's right. All the extra Christmas candy.
No, I need to ask a question.
Oh, yes,
We're
please.
trying to
Yeah.
motion so fast.
Yeah.
No, Councilmember Bradford did want me to convey that he had a concern that he reached out to you too, just about, I guess, an individual piece of legislation that looks like it'll have to be passed by the 16th, and was concerned about the 3 readings and the timing. And so I don't know how that, one-offs like that would need to be handled. Obviously, he could, I don't know what his particular circumstances are, maybe Chair Porterfield knows. So anyway, I guess I know we can vote and he will lose that vote. So my presumption is he will just need to figure it out with whomever the legislation is involving.
Or maybe, and my question was going to be, could he maybe file it earlier than what he had intended to file, because I would, and Director Darby, maybe you can help us out, but if the legislation is filed, do we have the schedule with us? If that legislation is filed, when would the legislation need to be filed by to make sure that it passes before January 16th? And we have no specifics on the actual legislation. He did just ask that we make sure that you all know that he has something that needs to be passed by January 16th. I am also strongly in favor of I'm just doing my due diligence as a good colleague and sharing that he has a concern, but one meeting in January is all right with me.
Well, but we also need to make sure that we have room for a deferral if it gets deferred, for whatever reason.
If with no deferral, it would need to be filed in order to be on first reading on the 5th of December.
He has plenty of time to do that. He could file it in November.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could file in November.
Okay.
Director Darby, do you mind, or Ms. Rosa, can somebody, so that we're not discussing the particulars with him, can somebody share that with him to make sure that he knows what he needs to file?
One thing I do want to point out though, because the compressed nature was also mentioned, the 16th will also be a compressed meeting because the 15th is a holiday. So.
It's okay, we'll be fine.
It's one of those things that happens in January regularly is that we have two compressed meetings to
meetings.
start the year.
Right, so, yeah.
We don't need to.
We got the time off.
That would have been the case anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. What if we do the first
Thursday.
meeting and then have a Thursday public hearing? And just put all your public hearings on that one meeting?
I have a separate suggestion. Could we still stick with one meeting in January, but maybe that meeting is January 18th, a Thursday, as opposed to a Tuesday, so that y'all don't have compressed coming right after the holiday, and we're still sticking with one meeting?
I think we're getting into the special meeting realm as opposed to regular meeting realm, so.
Yeah.
Can we split?
I'm okay with compressed on the 16th because it was gonna be compressed anyway. And I think since we got that extra time off on the 2nd, we should be ready, right?
But is staff gonna be ready?
She said yes.
Compressed meetings regularly throughout the year.
Yes.
So you're good with it?
Yeah.
It happens often because of Monday holidays.
Yes.
We have a really good staff.
I'm waiting for
Yeah.
you to stop talking so I can make them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can stop talking about it.
Okay. Are there any other questions or suggestions? And then let's make sure when we hear your motion that it checks all the boxes. So go ahead.
Okay, let's take a stab at it, shall we? We'll correct as we go.
Okay, sounds good.
I would like to make a motion that we do not have a January 2nd meeting, and that we have just one meeting in January that is compressed for both of those meetings, but that it goes for the entire term, so we don't have any meeting that's right after the New Year's holiday for the next 4 years.
May I restate?
Can we restate the motion?
I got the compressed.
I said I wanted to take a stab at it, and then corrections can be made.
I move that for the duration of the 2023-2027 term, we have one council meeting in the month of January, and that meeting will be the third Tuesday of the month.
Correct. Well done,
Oh, it's too
Chair.
bad it wasn't Jeopardy. That would be really great.
Okay,
to say
is there
Motions for
is there a
$1,000.
second?
There is a
Purposes of
second.
public hearing, do we need any language about that, or is it just adequate to?
Currently,
We'll
the
have the-
council rules of procedure say that the public hearing for zoning matters shall be on the first meeting of the month, and
Which
so
this will
if
be
it
the first
is the
meeting of the
only
That will
meeting of
be
the month,
the
it is
first
the
and only
first.
meeting of the month. Yes, but we can,
Is there a
through our
There
own
was a
communication, colleagues with constituents, with the community, be sure to convey that the public hearing is happening then. But I think we have a solid motion. Do I have
And
a
a second.
second? Okay.
Second, thirds,
Any-
fourths.
Any discussion on the motion that is before us?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Best thing to vote on all terms.
Okay. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Sensing unanimity, I did not ask if there were any opposed or abstaining. Thank you, Chair Porterfield. Anyone? Crickets? No? Okay. Yes. as I heard before, it was indeed unanimous. Okay, so moving on to rules change proposals. This is just to kind of preview to you all that this process is getting started, and so we are within our 60 days, and I know that Chair Sepulveda has met with Ms. Darby. You all may have some suggestions, but I was just going to put it to you, Chair, if there's anything that you want to share about that process, maybe inviting rules changes, whether from executive committee or otherwise, to be.
Yeah, so we, myself and Director Darby have met a week or two ago. I can't even remember at this point. I don't even know what day it is. Monday? I don't even know if that's right.
Tuesday.
It's
Recently. That's recently.
Tuesday. That's how my mind is right now. So we have met. We have several suggestions. I don't know if an email has gone out with those suggestions yet, but hopefully we will get that to the entire body for feedback. We are having a special called meeting on Thursday. This Thursday, I know several people will be at the Bellevue meeting. I know that there's something else going on Thursday.
Tanger.
Sure.
And the community grief and stuff
Bless you.
meeting, so, yeah. So
So
does it have to be Thursday?
it's already been noticed. So we are meeting on Thursday, but anyone who can't make it can send the suggestions. By Thursday, we have several suggestions that we have learned throughout the past 4 years, and maybe things that could be better. But if you all, if we could send that sooner rather than later, so we could get some feedback by the meeting on Thursday, depending on how the meeting goes, if we need to schedule a second meeting to discuss further, we will.
Okay. I think what I wanted to suggest, I have kind of my own markup. Some of our former colleagues have marked up. Shout out to Councilman Rosenberg. Had some thoughts. My former seatmate and our resident parliamentarian. I know Chair Wiener, you mentioned that you have some proposals. So I think Chair Sepulveda, what I might want to suggest is so that, returning members, I think will have ideas. And so, Thursday is coming up pretty fast. But that said, obviously, staff has a whole host of suggestions. And Ms. Darby and I have spoken about making sure that our rules are a little bit more accessible and legible. We do have some rules that are they're very deep and thick. Ms. Darby had an excellent suggestion of under this rule, subsequent numeration, right, as we kind of do in the code, because it's sort of like, well, here's a massive paragraph about this, and, you'll even hear in our meetings, in any particular rule, there's actually kind of two rules within the rule.
Yeah,
right?
we discussed this, and we had taken that into account.
Right.
And so the proposed rules changes that we have discussed, they also have Director Darby's breakdown as to why we're changing specific things and why it makes sense.
Great, I appreciate that. So I think at this juncture, it is then, if you do have suggestions, then to send them, Chair, to Margaret Darby. And I presume Ms. Darby will kind of aggregate those. We'll probably start to see some patterns, right? Like, oh, look, a lot of members want to change this. But then there will be another threshold, right? Like, these are the proposals, right? And so I think whether new members or returning members, some folks are just going to want to wait and see, like, the newly proposed. And I think it will be important to obviate and clarify what the changes are, right? Not so like, here's the new rules, but
We'll go through each specific rule and why it is being proposed as a change.
Right. And so from a timeline standpoint, I guess we would then anticipate this is kind of a process that's happening in November, effectively, right? And that we're taking a vote on that by the first meeting in December, would you think, Chair? Or Ms. Darby?
So I would think that we have the meeting on Thursday as kind of the kickoff meeting, and then I would expect to have a subsequent follow-up meeting with the rules committee.
That's probably right. We have had, even in just our discussions, there are a number of proposed changes.
Okay.
And so as we add everyone's suggestions and discuss those further,
Right.
I would imagine a second meeting is going to be necessary in which we take a deeper dive into it.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Question?
And then, yes. Ms.
Very
Dowd?
quickly,
Oh,
only
apologize.
because I'm getting ready to leave to go to Women's Caucus.
At
There are-
5:30.
Yeah, yes,
But preparation, I get it, yep.
yes.
ma'am. Yep.
The Sunshine Committee, as I'm on that, and then the Meals at Council, I've probably two
Yes,
things.
so
that-
let me, if I may, if I can acknowledge Ms. Swara for one more comment on rules changes, pull that together, and then we will jump ahead on the agenda to those
Awesome.
two items.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
And I'll make it very quick.
Mayor.
Since many of us would not be there on Thursday, when would we have those sent out so we can at least see it before that Thursday meeting, in case we have anything to add before then?
I think that we can probably send something out tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
I want to talk to you first.
Okay. Alrighty, so then, yeah, that, it's a process that's getting started. Welcome your input, and/or if you want to wait till you kind of see the first turn on it, either way. And thank you so much to Chair Sepulveda, because it's a pretty heavy lift at the start of the term. And so, we've already taken 2 votes here that will inform those rule changes, because those standing committees are in our rules. Our schedule of meeting is as well. So, okay, so any other things to share or discuss particular to rules changes? Yes,
Are
Ms.
we-
Porterfield.
Proposed changes, should they be sent to Director Darby?
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yes, correct. Okay, so Ms. Darby, I'm going to skip ahead on the staffing update because Chair Stiles needs to get over to the start of Women's Caucus. So Sunshine Committee and Meals both kind of fall in a similar space. And so I appreciate Chair Stiles and Ms. Vo expressing an interest in coordinating this effort. And so this is, colleagues, if, folks are, in the hospital or, their family is bereaved in some way, happy things, birth of a new child, you've got some young members, I don't know. But I think the proposal would be, and then I will let you speak further, Ms. Stiles, and because I do have sort of a suggestion in here, is that we invite every member here at the start of the term just to, $25. And that is accountable. It is on a spreadsheet maintained by Ms. Calder. And so Ms. Stiles and Ms. Vo would be, have the delegated authority to order the flowers, purchase the baby gift, get the birthday cards, and do those things. But the accountability comes through giving that receipt to Ms. Calder so that can be documented, and that comes back to this committee to show this is how we are spending members' money. So,
Okay, if that was a
Ms. Stiles.
motion, I'll second it. I have a question then.
yes, yeah.
As we're about to talk about dues for Women's Caucus.
Yeah.
So then shall we just duplicate that as well? So whatever dues we're collecting, those receipts, anything that gets spent, go to Maria as well, and also come back and report here on that one as well.
So I think the challenge comes, and this is something that we probably need to talk about in another executive committee, of how caucuses and things for the body kind of work separately. And so I do want to kind of figure out a way that we can get a little more structure into caucus support from a scheduling standpoint, but we've got to kind of keep those separate because, if something is, for the collegiality and support of the body that we ask every single member to do, that kind of operates in a different space from how a caucus would operate. So I think we can definitely continue that discussion about kind of caucus caucus process and support. But at this time, I would also suggest, colleagues, sadly, though many of us mentioned it to dear former budget chair Roten, we do not have money for our meals.
My
in
stomach just
the
spoke.
budget. And I think we can kind of conclude both of these together, because I would propose sort of addressing them in a similar way. I know that colleagues have been kind to order personally, then we Venmo them, or they give them, you know, and then it's very higgledy-piggledy, like, it's not like.
Or never.
Well, right, it's not like the
pay back.
pizza cost $400, we expect $10 from everybody, and then trying to kind of get that managed. So what I would also likewise suggest in a similar vein to Sunshine Committee, paying in, you know, $25 to start for all the flowers and the cards and the so forth, would be similarly doing that for meals. And then we say on public hearing night only, and set some sort of metric, right? Like, we don't want to order dinner if, for whatever reason, a public hearing night concludes at 8. But, you know, by a certain kind of temporal threshold, if we still have half the agenda to do, then someone on staff will be designated to order that, and then we will use the food for that. So I would invite discussion on that.
What I wanted to ask is that I know that it was not in the budget that was passed, but I'm putting it to staff, and maybe something that we can look into. We know that historically the travel funds is never exhausted, and so is there a way to have a budget amendment wherein some of those money goes towards the meals? Or is this something in the law that says that we cannot use council money to buy meals for council members for working late?
It is not in the law that says that you can't use these funds to purchase meals. Whether or not we can utilize some another area or some savings in the budget to spend on this would be something that I think this group would need to decide. I would not recommend, and I think this is on the list up here too, to talk about the travel fund. We just increased that this year to give more money per council person to be able to attend educational conferences. And so I would be reluctant to then take money from there when we're trying to open the door for more educational opportunities for the council members.
So, Madam Chair, what I would ask, and I think that I'm totally in support of the $25 for the flowers, for the cards, but I think when it comes to the meals, I think it's a different thing entirely, in my opinion. And so maybe it's something that we need to talk to the finance department to see if there's any money somewhere that can kick us off and get us started. It is part of doing business, it is part of working here. And so maybe not the travel fund, I get that, but is there any where there will be an allocation would be what I would suggest, if we can look into that, would be my recommendation.
Porterfield.
I'm not advocating for this change. I am simply asking a question, so I just want to make sure that's stated. I know we paid Pat Nolan to come and kind of scribe what's happening before and after the meeting. Has there been any conversation or communication about, are we doing that again this term? And if we are not, that could be funds that could potentially be tapped to use for these purposes.
Okay, I appreciate let's maybe address that question. Mr. Nolan, at his asking, is not returning for us. And so I think that was a fairly sizable line item. I think that was $10,000.
I think it was $250 per meeting, right?
It's somewhere between, we have somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 in an object account.
Yeah, and so I do think it does become somewhat challenging because, that was for a particular, public awareness, communication standpoint. And so the nexus between that and food is a little
It's the public awareness.
I think, Ms. Hayes, can you kind of give some feedback as far as, when we do order, kind of what is in your mind sort of the time threshold on that? Do you kind of look at the agenda and think, oh, good night, it's pushing up on 8 o'clock and we're only 2/3 the way through the agenda? And let's just say when you do order, hypothetically pizza for the body, what are we talking about cost-wise?
I do that based on the timing, and also I get about 15 or 20 texts, I'm hungry.
Yes.
I said, okay. Depending on about what time it is, you're limited about what you can get, so.
Right.
And
It's
it
kind of like
runs-
what's still open, basically,
Right.
at that point,
and
yeah.
so it's around $300,
Okay,
and that's the bare minimum per, pizza. I get what I can for $300 usually,
okay.
and that's, delivery too.
Sheila, I did some math.
Yes. I was like,
I know
who's-
that's a
who's-
shock. So I took $300 and multiplied it by 12 meetings, because it's only public hearing,
Correct.
and divided that by 41 members. So for a year, it would cost each of us $87.80. The reason I did that is I have a heartburn about some of this. I think it's great that we provide meals. We've always done that. I think it's smart. We've been on the honor system, as you've said, and that has been an abysmal failure.
Yes.
Having said all those things, I'm not sure that using taxpayer money to pay for my meal, that just gives me heartburn. And I think that if we all have campaign funds or some other fund that we would use to spend on our own meals, that we contribute to the fund personally. And that's, I don't know if you want to do it in the form of an assessment or whatever, but we need to be able to fund our own food, I think.
I think one of the challenges comes in, not everybody has residual campaign funds.
Exactly.
And I think some of the challenge has been in some of the awkwardness of somebody saying, oh, hey, I'll do it, and oh, thank you so much, colleague, or whatever. But then just like, we have not historically said, Ms. Hayes, like, the pizza cost $300, that's $8, everyone, and, put it in this envelope, right? So we've not necessarily organized meeting by meeting to say, like, pay up now, right? We've, so I don't think if every member were to be at, like, did you pay for your dinner? Did you pay for your dinner? But, is it really staff's job to go around to 40 people and say, did you pay for your dinner? Did you pay for your dinner? Did you pay for your dinner? Like, they are busy in the meeting supporting us in other ways. And so, I think Sunshine Committee, I think we're in a kind of a good space there as far as, a $25 and what that would mean over the arc of the term. The meals themselves, just practically, we can't say to every member, like, your committee meetings start at 4, and when you're starting to push up on 9 or 10 o'clock, so there is some, like, we cannot do our job well if we are not feeding our brains, right? So we can't ask 40 people to bring a Tupperware and heat it all up in the one microwave in the clerk's kitchen. Like, just logistically, we can't do that, so.
Not messing up your quorum.
Right. Right, and everybody goes out to have their little, yes, we've had it kind of like, y'all stop eating your pizza, get back in,
Can I suggest,
Yeah.
depending on what we decide here?
Yeah.
If we print out a QR code or leave a little lockbox in the kitchen, that way when people go and grab food, they could just scan it and
yeah,
donate.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That still makes it optional. And
Well,
the
that's if we're
reason
gonna make it
everybody does
optional,
that.
right?
Well, and two, I think to your point, like, I would not say that the honor system hasn't worked well because we haven't really implemented the honor system. So no one has said, you're on the honor system, this pizza has been procured by your colleague and we expect you, nobody's said that. And so I would hope that colleagues would, if they do have a piece of pizza, pay the thing. But, so I think, we are probably not quite there on how we should proceed with the meal piece. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to kind of share about this to kind of get on the record? And then I'm trying to think if, this is not something that we had to be kind of voted on. And so this may be an email later, but yes.
Can we
Councilwoman.
do the QR code in the meantime, or whatever it is, while we figure it out? Because sometimes someone from the council body will pay, and we don't know who paid for what.
Correct.
So until we figure out what it is we're doing, we should at least be able to chip in the meantime.
Okay, so maybe then for the November meeting, trying to see if we can do it kind of the old way but better. And then maybe come up with
And
a
then see how that works.
proposal for what exactly this should be, and then, whatever the budgetary implications are. So I think we could handle it similar to Sunshine Committee, where you're just saying, okay, $50, colleagues, that's gonna go to dinner. I think that's pretty simple. And I think, Chair Wiener, we don't always order, so it's not necessarily 87. I think, if we're kind of keeping it, again, under 100 for members, just for affordability, if you say 25 for Sunshine, 50 for dinner. But what I'm sensing is maybe we don't quite know what we want to do about the meals. So can we kind of just parse that and say, and again, we're not taking a vote, but is everyone generally okay with 25 for Sunshine to be managed and accountable by Maria? And then meals, then I guess the suggestion would be trying to optimize kind of the old way of the first November, or do you have a different suggestion?
What I would suggest is if there's a member, like it was often Kathleen, or
Yeah.
sometimes the convention is if you have a particularly contentious zoning bill, it's your turn to fight. Perhaps members can go ahead and print off their Venmo so that we're not asking staff to set up an account tied to a Venmo and then dispersing those funds. So
Yeah.
if you're thinking it might be your turn or you're gonna step up and get the pizza, maybe just print that card off or just a piece of paper and fold it up and stick it on the table for the next meeting, just so, because I think Venmo is probably the most universally had thing. That's what I would suggest to whoever does it. I do apologize, I stepped out for a moment and then I came back and we were at the end of the agenda.
We
skip
jumped
down.
ahead because Styles needed to
Thank
go
you.
to
Okay,
Women's
so we're still gonna hit
Caucus.
these other things, that's,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, ma'am.
It seems from, if it appears as if at least at this table, everybody's leaning towards people paying for their pizza, whether it's through the QR code or because they don't want to use tax money. If that's the consensus, then I think let's just go ahead and say this $50 a year and do that and not even try let's start QR. If that's where we're going, I don't think there's anything wrong with a business providing meals for a long meeting. I really don't think there's anything wrong in doing it budgetarily. But if people are not okay with it, and that's the majority of us as the executive committee, then let's make it easy on ourselves and everybody and just go with the $75, 50 for meals, 25 for Sunshine, and keep it moving. I'm okay with it.
Okay.
And if I may, just for the viewing public, I mean, I get having like a philosophical or whatever distinction, but like, we are generally talking about like folks stepping out of a meeting for 5-ish minutes and standing in a
Eating
80 square foot break room and eating what's usually cold pizza.
Cold pizza, yeah. It's not like we have caviar. Thank you.
This is not a lavish meal.
It's not a lavish meal at all.
There are no,
Champagne.
There's no champagne, no caviar,
so.
no steak. How? Maybe steak.
Okay, so then, do we feel comfortable with kind of the aggregated 25 Sunshine, 75 meals for 100 total? Is everybody comfortable?
I'm good with that as a starting
with
place,
it.
yes.
Okay.
I think that's a great way to
Do we
start.
want to kind of make a motion and put this to a vote?
I move that we invite every council member to contribute $25 to go towards the Sunshine Fund and contribute $75 to go to our yearly fund for the money to be collected by Maria Calder, and for the council office at their discretion to order food on a monthly basis for our long meetings.
That is a proper
I'll second
motion and
that.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? No, okay, all right, yay, okay, well done. Combine those, check that off, that's great.
Sherry will pay mine from my leftover funds.
Okay, we are bleeding into Women's Caucus, as I knew that we might. But Ms. Darby, can you provide a quick council office staffing update for us, please?
Yes, we have recently moved Rashad Faltis over to Constituent Services. He's requested to move over there, so he's going to be one of your contacts for Constituent Services. When you send the emails in to Constituent Services, he will be one of the people that will be helping you. And we've made an offer to Melanie Cruz, who will be starting on Monday and getting trained up on Constituent Services as well. So we'll have 2 primaries for that. And then we are in the process of making an offer to a 3rd person who will be partially responsible for some constituent services and partially responsible for some, to do some of our PIO work that we're still kind of hammering out the development of what that specifically will look at, but more kind of in the communications, working in our newsletter, things like that.
So if I can share just by way of update, Chair, before we move on. So there were kind of 3 administrative positions open, you know, with the kind of constituent services moniker. I think, you know, we as a body over the years have kind of looked at that space and thought, like, how does this work? Do we need more people here? Are we going to divide it by district or geography or departmental specialty, or what is this going to look like? So I appreciate Margaret working with me and hearing kind of the will of the body around communications and PIO. I'm going to assert that in time, I think that is going to be a role that can just stand alone and be its own position. And so Margaret, in rewriting that job description and looking at that and in interviewing, has made sure that that person does have the acumen to write well, good communication skills, you know, facility with social media and so forth. So I appreciate kind of having the openness there that if we kind of see how it falls out with these new admin positions, that position could become that role exclusively. And then as well, I think when we kind of think about what are the pathways for the different typical asks that we make in the council office, Margaret is also working with me on, we're not going to call it, I can't think of anything to call it other than not a menu of services, but just...
I'm just kidding, don't say hub.
Yeah, no. But that, you know, kind of typical requests that come from council members, and while it is important for Ms. Hayes to be aware in her managerial role of, you know, what has been asked for, but, you know, kind of getting to a place where whether to the constituent services email specifically, that's something that multiple people can see and then it can be delegated from there, or saying, okay, on these particular tasks, right, that this person is the primary assigned with a CC to these folks. So, you know, in this kind of transitional time, folks who are being hired on need to be kind of cross-trained in, you know, the hub system and kind of just generally administrative support in this office, but working to move towards, you know, slightly more clear pathways for this is the person for this and that, and kind of obviating to the body how it all works together, right? And so I think in doing that, then we'll kind of know kind of how best to communicate back out to the body, right? So when everybody came on new, we had all these open positions. And so, I don't think we're really at a place from an orientation standpoint to be like, all right, this is the person for this and this is the person for that. So Margaret has been working to get these folks onboarded. And so, that's just that. Ms. Porfield, do you have something to share or ask?
Thank you. 2 questions. First question, Rashad and Melanie, are either of them or both of them bilingual or multilingual?
Both of them are bilingual. Rashad speaks Arabic and Melanie speaks Spanish.
Speaks French too.
Rashad?
Yeah, we should have been there for Sister Cities today.
Okay, Arabic and French and Spanish. That is awesome. That will be very helpful. And then, are they getting a bump in pay for their ability to be bilingual?
No, they are getting paid the salary level for the ASO position that they're hired for.
So,
There's no additional increase in pay, that's just part of the
are they
position job
expected are they expected to translate? I know that there was an issue before with an individual that worked in the council office that was bilingual, that was being asked to translate, but they, from what I was told, I do not have all the information, but from what I was told, they were supposed to get additional money because they were bilingual and because they were translating.
No, when we hire people, we make an offer and you know the parameters. We request that you, speak an additional language or what have you. And when we make an offer to you, we make the offer of this salary, whatever that salary is, and you can choose to accept it or not.
Okay.
So,
Yes, please.
so being bilingual is a requirement for the position.
It is, it's preferred for the position. So you, as a candidate coming in for an interview, if you, we say bilingual, some sort of bilingual language is preferred. So you might rise to the level of getting the offer as opposed to someone who doesn't have that skill.
So in the bilingual skills, is that in conversational, or is there the requirement to translate documents?
It's not a specific requirement that you translate documents. We, have asked employees in the past if somebody needed that type of service, that they might be available to go do that translation for them. Document translation can often be done on Google. There is a translation button that you can press and choose from a wide variety of languages. We do occasionally get people, and it's very, very rarely that we get people calling into the office, speaking another language or asking for some sort of translation services. But, we currently have, Melanie's gonna be an additional Spanish speaker in our office. We currently have Karina, who also speaks Spanish, and she has, spoken to someone on the phone to assist them with whatever their need is.
And not to get into your office business, I'm not aware of the situation, but I was just thinking in terms of retention and longevity, to be able to start looking into if there's additional requirement in terms of maybe translation or something outside of the basic stuff, if that's something that the department will look into, additional remuneration or overtime or something. I don't know. It's not my place to tell you how to take care of your business, but I was just, since it was just mentioned, which I don't know about, but that's what I would put into place.
And I believe this was before you directed Darby, so
yeah.
yes.
And I probably would have had the same response now or then that I do now, but I have made an offer to pay for certifications. We do try to offer, continuing education to people in the office, and so certification, offer payment for whatever the testing might be or the certification is, so that is something that is
benefits.
we're
Thank
willing
you.
to consider.
Yes.
And then one more question. You said Rashard was moved to constituent services. what was the previous position, and is someone else going to be put in that previous position? And
He was working in finance. He actually was hired on to replace a position that we lost down the hall when Austin left.
Irreplaceable,
We've had a
Mr.
lot
Kyle.
of people leaving.
Two gentlemen in this room.
We had a constant struggle to try to replace, and so Rashad came on to fill that position. And we are going to look to continue to fill that position in a more finance role, but he's going to be working in constituent services moving forward.
Any other questions, suggestions around staffing? More to come, I guess.
This may be getting in the weeds, but when we speak about translators, I think about American Sign Language. And I think about folks that are severely hearing impaired, who do need that support. And I know in clinic life, when we have a patient that comes in and that patient is severely hearing impaired and requires a sign language interpreter, it is incumbent upon that practice, that clinic has to pay the fee for the interpreter to come in. So my question is, does Metro have a line item for that?
So I would have to check with our contract, with our vendor, to see what types of people we can bring on. But we hire currently someone to come in for public hearing nights to be available to offer interpretation services in Spanish. The service does not get utilized often. I think it's been utilized maybe 2 times in the past year, almost close to 2 years. We have not, I don't know if they offer ASL or not, or sign language. That's something that we can ask about to see what the fee is. Right now, currently, for the interpreter that does come to our meetings, we have to pay a minimum of 3 hours for that person to be there. Sometimes they're there longer than 3 hours. If they're only there for an hour, we still pay for the 3 hours, so it's a minimum fee. And, we have to plan for that person to be there in advance, so it's not like someone stands up at a meeting, needs the service, and then we can stop everything and call them in. Unlike a court, so, for instance, courts have somebody on call to be able to do that. It's a smaller proceeding, and it's easier for them to coordinate having the person on call that can offer whatever types of interpretation services are needed.
My second question to that, if I may. So when we have this televised, our meetings are televised, are they subtitled? Do we have caption?
Yes.
Yes,
Or do we have
so
an interpreter who is actually signing within?
I
the
do not
screen?
believe we do any sign language interpretation. We haven't gone that
But it
far
is-
yet.
But it is closed captioned.
There's closed captioning in
Okay.
English, there's closed captioning in Spanish, and in the room now, we have closed captioning in English, Spanish, and
I saw.
Arabic. And I don't want to speak out of turn because I can't remember right now, but I know on MNN, they offer the live streaming in English, and I want to say maybe in Spanish as well, but I feel like I'm stepping outside my lane on that one. But I know that once you're not watching streaming and you're watching the recorded meetings, I believe there's a way for you to get closed captioning on, I think YouTube offers closed captioning also, in whatever language you want.
Okay.
And Chair Wiener, I know that you had a conversation with kind of technology and AV staff around, folks who may be hearing impaired or just having difficulty. I know even those of us, in the body sometimes, is that mic on the podium just right and so forth. So I do know that Mr. Buckles had kind of AV sound system folks here. We've not had that updated since 2008, was it?
I don't know the date, but they are looking into.
So just the bandwidth, old term, but of, how many mics can be on and the volume of that, and I know you were talking
Placement of the
about.
speakers.
Right, and all those kind of things. So there's some optimizing to be done there, and I appreciate your care and concern around that, so we'll keep you in the loop on that. Okay, y'all, I touched on orientation, kind of goes back and continuing. Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, choose to go with that, yeah.
So, just touching on that as far as accessibility, right? I think we need to have a longer discussion, a separate meeting about it. I know that I've had colleagues who have done a lot of work so far that we got as far as the captions on the screen, and that's great. But when talking about, bilingual pay and all of this, we call that bilingual money. On average, in the city, it's at least $50 an hour to translate for an hour. I have had several colleagues who call me and have me on the phone to translate while they're talking to constituents, right? I don't get extra bilingual money for that. And it's very hard to convince a community, several different communities, to be more engaged in our process when it's not accessible. So while it's great that we have a translator now on, public comment and public hearing, whatever, I still have to do the educational piece to let them know this is available. Metro Planning still has to send out notices in Spanish to make sure that the people, and Arabic and Kurdish and all that, or have something on there to let them know it's happening. There has to be a bigger conversation regarding this, because there is a reason that the council office doesn't get a bunch of Spanish calls, and it's because I get all the Spanish calls. There's a reason that the Muslim community just goes straight to Zolfat, right? There has to be a much, much bigger conversation because it is so much extra work that gets put on us.
I appreciate that. And I think too, colleagues, I found out this term in a meeting with, Mr. Durbin that, we had for many years had 24/7 ITS support for us as a body in Metro. I was like,
What?
I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that. So I think from just a compliance and supportive standpoint for government of our size, I think there is kind of a question at a larger metro level, right? That somebody is on call in the call center at the 20, and so then it's not the colleague saying, oh, Sandra speaks Spanish, that's very kind of you, fundamentally unfair. You shouldn't have to have that extra burden. But if for a government of our size in the city that we are with the predominant languages, it feels like from an accessibility standpoint, right? So every meeting has the standard. And I think we can start to kind of formalize that communication, but we need to make sure that there's kind of budget there to support that. And what would that look like, and what do other cities do? So, Ms. Darby, remind me kind of conversations that happened in executive committee in years past. I think perhaps when I was not on the executive committee, but maybe one year that I was, whether the interpreter who is in the meeting, the closed caption we got on TV, what was sort of the process where this committee kind of looked at that, formalized what those asks were, and kind of brought that into the budget process?
So the committee had requested that we look into it.
Okay.
And so our office did, and this was kind of happening right as I came on board.
Okay.
That we did some research to see what kind of contracts Metro has in place that we can utilize. And so based on that and utilizing those contracts that are already in place, we've hired, or we call, I can't remember the name of the company. We call this company, and they send someone over to our meetings once a month, and we have that all scheduled out. We put a line item in our budget so that we can pay for it. And then subsequent to that, additional, I think, because, once you're successful in one area, we're like, oh, well, what can we do next? And so we get successful in other areas. So then we were looking at additional closed captioning on the screens and for the televisions in the room. We worked with MNN to get that and put that into place. And, they went out and found the modules, and they did some, I do not speak tech, but they expanded tech things so that we could put modules in, and the language shows up on the television.
Yeah.
I walked into a room, saw that it was working, and I said, yes, this is perfect, this is exactly what we asked for, thank you so much. So to the extent, and I know that we, since speaking with you, my next ask to ITS was, hey, there are apparently, again, speaking tech, people can put something on their cell phone so that they can hear our meeting in their hearing aids, and how do we make that happen, and what can we do? And so that's my latest ask for them, is to kind of tell me, what the cost is, what the infrastructure looks like, so that we can then make a decision about whether we want to move forward with it on a, doing a cost analysis. So I don't have that information yet, but that is something that I probably need to get them some more parameters to look at before we can get that.
I'll look at it with
To the extent that we want to, hire additional persons to be available to translate at meetings, if we want to do Arabic translation at the meetings or interpretation at the meetings, then we can, or ASL interpretation at the meetings, we can look into those costs if that's something that you want us to look into. But all of these things do have a cost associated with them, and so that means more than likely it would be a budget item for next fiscal year.
And potentially a budget item more broadly for Metro, so that whomever is doing interpretive services, whether ASL or Spanish, they're going to Planning Commission on the Thursdays, they're coming to council meetings by request at other meetings, whether contracted or employed or otherwise. I think it becomes, we need to do our best to be as accessible as possible and as fair as possible about what we are translating in all those services, but I think it's a broader Metro conversation in my view, because it shouldn't just be on us. So yes, Mr. Harvey.
I don't want to interrupt, but I just received an email today from someone talking about the language services and what we use, and so there is a conversation coming up to get feedback about what we're using, and this went out to all departments. So it's not just us that are looking into this. There are other departments that'll be also giving that feedback to see what kind of language services we use, and whether it needs to be expanded, or whether one contract is better than another, or what have you. I know that there's also, and I have a note to go back and look for it, but there's a service that allows you to call in to a company to have someone on the other end do interpretation services on the spot. This would not work well for what we do in the rooms over in the chamber, but it could work well for those instances where council members have a constituent that they need somebody to help them right then and there, that they could call into this number and have some translation or interpretation happening kind of on the fly. I don't know what that number is, but I'm have that down to look up.
And then I think we need to think about then physical translation. So if we're doing community meetings, and whether that is more broadly in any council member's district, because they understand kind of the balance of population, or if they're having a particular endeavor that they think it makes sense that this is in more than one language. I have seen, whether in the health department or here and there, on the Instagram, the slides, okay, we're doing it. Councilwoman Spolta does an excellent job, in her newsletter. And so I think what I'm hoping then that Metro, not just in kind of verbal interpretation in meetings, that, and whether we formalize that into council staff and say, among Ms. Valdez's or the new hire's responsibilities is, if you have a community meeting flyer that you want also in Spanish, that is a service that this office can render, and you need 48 hours advance notice, and, we just kind of normalize that into our, I'm not saying, menu of services. So I think we got to come up with some other way to refer to that. But I think, right? But, so it's not just sort of ad hoc, as you will, oh, hey, Karina, could you do the, oh, wait, Sandra, could you, we just need to kind of say, if we think it's best practice, and supporting, council members who serve the Kurdish community, Hispanic community, that they need all their materials, that are in a public service awareness meeting standpoint, translated, physically, that's something either we do or that Metro provides that, again, because they employ 2 or 3 people, and we do it for the health department, we do it for council, and we do it for all these, so.
And again, I think that the companies that we work with, the vendors that we work with they do translation services per page, I think a fee per page.
Okay. One last thing, Pro Tem, because we are over time, so.
And I don't mean to drag it too. I think it's going to be a larger conversation. I just wanted to ask a question and then another suggestion. As you're looking into all of that, there are also devices that people can also put on and will do the translation. And I've seen that done in the larger context of meetings. And so that might be something we can look into. It's something like the UN will do, and you're speaking into one speaker, but it's translated into different languages. I don't know the cost, but it's something to look at. The other thing that I wanted to clarify with you is with the closed caption. I wasn't sure if you said that happened only in recorded meetings, or does the closed caption, is that an option for when we're meeting? So that we don't need to have translation and somebody can just watch from their home?
So there's a module that was added into the system to allow translation in Arabic, closed captioning live in the room.
Okay, thank you.
It's important to note that there's not a person sitting back there typing out everything. That would be
It's a computer.
cost prohibitive. It is all artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So, I know you've seen closed captioning before and you're like, that's not what they just said. That word isn't right. It's because it's AI, it's a computer listening to it and translating it. It's not a person.
Okay, we're making progress. We just need to make sure we add more. But at least I can tell people, watch the meetings and you can actually closed caption it in Arabic or Spanish.
And the closed captioning in any language is offered by YouTube after the meeting is over. So when you watch the recording, not the live streaming version.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, alrighty, so orientation feedback, we kind of touched on that by way of introduction, continuing education as well, kind of at the top of the meeting.
If I may, I'll be very, very brief.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there like a spreadsheet that, like, who tracks our utility training status? So can members just email you and say, where am I at? What are the opportunities?
Yes, we checked with the comptroller and they do not keep up with it, so they've asked that we keep up with the list. We have a spreadsheet. And then if you haven't contacted me, let me know that you've received any kind of training. I won't have that in the last 3 years, but I'm supposed to have a copy of the receipt too, your certificate too. I need to have a copy of that as well.
And
Yeah.
the water utility training, you should be getting, if you go to that, you can get all of your hours through the programs that they're offering. And then I know Ms. Allman will present you with the certificate at the end that you can then, and I think she's also sending it to Rosie
I think
as
she's
well.
just sending it directly to Rosie, because there was an awkwardness, I will tell you, in going to the comptroller's website, and I did the 30-minute thing and the 30-minute thing, and then I had to print off a thing, and I'm like, reading it
They also ask us too that every year, like if you've done something or you haven't done something, you have to fill out a form and it has to be filed with me as well, whether you take a class or not. They want you by the end of the year.
I think there is an opportunity there, Councilman Parker, to just optimize just a little bit. I think Ms. Allman now is, again, getting that to Rosie, so that's kind of recorded. I think it may be helpful if that just sort of kind of lives online somewhere, whether in a OneDrive or a SharePoint, so folks can kind of keep up with, because you sort of lose sight of, I've been on the body for 3 years, but I did this number of hours, but I'm required to do this. Like it's sort of difficult for, and I know difficult as well for, 40 members, 50% new, so they have a different threshold of what they need to do, a 3-year arc, though we're a 4-member body. Like, I absolutely think we can optimize that, because I felt last time it was like, wait, 3 things that were provided didn't aggregate to the amount of hours that I was supposed to get. And I mean, I was like super nervous, like, like the state is gonna come down on us, And in the end, they did not ask for all the various, but if you can imagine, like those modules from the comptroller, if you had to print out and say that you did it, respectfully, I think, the onus could somewhat be on the comptroller side of the house to, like, when you log in as the elected representative, then their system just shows that you did it, because all 40 of us printing out X number of modules of printouts to then take to you to prove we did it, but then they don't ever ask for them. So I think let's have sort of a proactive conversation with the comptroller's office about kind of optimizing that process, because it gives, I think, members a little existential angst. Like, did I do all the things that I'm supposed to do? But I think Ms. Allman in her communication has been pretty clear, like, this fulfills these hours. So for those of us returning, Councilman Parker, I think we're in a more awkward spot, because it's like, wait, what are we supposed to do? For new members, I think it's sort of starting off a little bit better, and they'll get that covered. Does that meet your request?
Yeah, that's enough. And I know we've got a lot of items to touch
Okay.
on. I just wanted to highlight that a little bit for
Okay.
returning members, maybe not knowing exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it is a little trickier for
When you're a new
returning
member,
members.
it's very clear, like,
Just email me and I'll look at the spreadsheet.
I will, thank you.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Porterfield.
I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, could there be one document created? I mean, just a checklist is fine, but that tells us, like, these are the things that we need to do, because in addition to the utilities training, there's also, like the ethics thing that we have to do, and like the conflict of interest thing that we have to do. And you all are really good about, like, emailing us and letting us know that, that's coming up, but it'll also be really helpful if we just had it in one place so that we could, kind of self-manage and check off as we go, so that we can help you all by managing ourselves a little better.
Yeah, I think so, because that's always kind of hanging out there just a little bit, like.
The other thing, back on that comptroller thing, I talked to them a year or so ago, but the problem is with the 3-year, the comptroller said that he would suggest us doing it by year, January 1 to January the 31st of December. But y'all are elected in September, October, so that sort of messes you up. So the people that are actually coming back, you've already got your 12 years, but you're starting all over again. So he suggested I start in January of this coming year, but your water training's now. So I'm a little bit confused on, do I start, he said that just to keep it clean, just start your first year like January 1.
Well,
And go for 3 years.
If you'll just kind of loop me in on that, and then maybe that's just me as the vice mayor saying to the comptroller's office, like, here's what we're encountering, and, we'll just kind of see if we can make an ask there and get that a little more helpful to members. And I appreciate that there's a variety of things that boxes that we need to check to make sure we're in compliance for things, and so we'll keep discussing that, and I appreciate your suggestion. Okay, so joint calendars, that's also kind of in a space of having some feedback. I'm gonna meet with Ms. Hayes and Ms. Valdez. We have created a legislative calendar with all our filing deadlines. I think that's pretty clear. That's sort of living there, and I think that's helpful and something members have wanted for a long time. We're still kind of sussing out, like, what is the general events and continuing ed, like, first it didn't have a lot of content, now it has a fair amount of content. I don't know if we need to parse that into continuing ed and general events, like, hey, we're going to the Veterans Day Parade, or, the YWCA is having a luncheon, things that we are generally invited to as a body and are aligned with the work that we do. So it's not every single thing in your district. So we're still kind of sussing that out, what that looks like. So I would appreciate your feedback, just how you make sure you're opted into that calendar, or calendars on Outlook, and just welcome any feedback on that and how that's sort of looking. At this juncture, it's just a lot of like, oh, this is in my inbox. It looks like it's of general interest to the body. I forward it to Ms. Valdez, and up on the calendar it goes. So it's hopefully not just me doing that. I'm happy to do that, but I also don't want to put the burden on like a 40-member body to be like sending all this kind of stuff. So we're kind of still figuring that one out. So that's sort of the brief update on that. We also touched on previously about kind of travel and education fund. What Ms. Darby and I are talking about there is, conferences that, the Walk Bike Conference in Knoxville or America Walks came to Nashville one time, and I was like, oh, so we only pay for me to get on a plane and go somewhere to do this conference, but if it's here in my own city, that's not covered. Like, we worked that out, but I want to make sure that we have that very kind of clear on this next cycle, that anything that is kind of supporting your work as a member, policy work, the work that you do, your leadership as an elected official, that can, same amount for everybody, but so at this juncture, I think those kind of things that are not on the executive committee list, like National League of Cities and otherwise, and some of these other conferences, if there are particular conferences that you know of, like the Walk Bike Tennessee or America Walks, or I've already kind of thought of a few of those to add, I would welcome you to send those to me and Ms. Darby, just so that we could kind of build out that list. But that said, if it's under the umbrella of the work that we do, and, I think not all members are going to be able to travel and do or go to national cities, but, if it helps a member not to have to pay $65 to attend that conference, and that's within their budgeted amount, I think that's good for us to do. We have general concurrence here that that's kind of an okay, thumbs up thing to be doing. Okay, and so our last item here, just 1 minute, Ms. Hayes, if you could just update us on National League of Cities Conference.
So far, we have 19 going.
Oh, wow.
Some people have not responded. I'm still working with the National League of Cities to get the cheaper rate. And we're trying to get everybody in the same hotel. So still, if you want to fly, you need to go on and make your flight or your arrangements. There's a rate going out. It's a little bit higher coming back, but I think a lot of people are driving. So just let me know when you're going and when you're coming back, because I need to know for hotel purposes.
What's the dates again?
16th through the 18th
Of November.
Yeah.
I would suggest going out on the 15th. It's a Wednesday, because that afternoon really sort of opens up the expo, and then Thursday they have the openings, journal
Yes, they start
sessions.
very early on Thursday, so.
And so it's really to get you there timely, go sometime on Wednesday and then start on Thursday and Friday. The closing event's on Saturday. You're welcome to stay for that. It's usually a big event where everybody goes and they have, entertainment of some sort to just close out the event, and then people leave on Sunday. Checkout's at 11.
Yeah, and some people, you can leave on Saturday, you don't have to stay
Right.
for that
You don't
final
have to
event.
stay.
I think all the kind of official meeting type things are pretty much done midday.
There's a
and there's one other
business meeting at
convenient-
noon, or I think
On
2
Saturday?
o'clock
Uh-huh.
on Saturday. And that's usually when each representative from every state votes. So you would probably be the delegate, and then if you can't go, then you can move that to someone else. You just have to let me know. But I haven't received anything on the delegate yet. Usually there's a form we fill out with your name on it.
Well, yeah, and I think, as committee chairs, if you are able to attend and you look at the agenda, even if you're not able to attend, I think, Ms. Hayes, you sent an email, was that on Friday? It was a little bit of an update, so I encourage y'all to look at that email. I think we have one member who's on that list that is no longer attending, but if you are unable to go, please do still look at the agenda. And, you may have a committee member that is going to the conference, and you might want to just bring, Chair Parker, if there's something about infrastructure or sidewalks, you might want to bring that to a member's attention. I think people will just kind of choose what's in their kind of policy area of interest, but I would encourage you all, if you think there's things that you want committee members to be well-versed in. But I'm excited that we've got about half the body going, and I think that'll be good to kind of build collegiality and so forth. So I am flying outbound on Wednesday. I've got a $70 Southwest ticket.
It's
But
59 right now.
Ooh.
yeah,
I have a conference on Saturday in
Yeah.
It's a
Nashville.
little bit,
That's my
little bit
birthday.
high.
and the
coming back,
return
so-
at
I've got
present
that
was about
Saturday.
149 a Saturday return.
Think about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
leave
so,
Wednesday.
Okay.
Ms. Hayes, is that window closed for members as far as
I'm gonna drive back
getting signed up? I mean, is that
Saturday
done?
So that I
What
can
time
take
do
my
you
grandson to the
I can push a
I've got
couple
to be
more
here
in
on
if I
time.
Okay, so a few more people can be
Can we say
added
about
if
that?
needed. Okay,
somebody take that person.
I'm happy for
cancel.
you, Rod.
colleagues, with that, we are to the end of the agenda. Is there any other business that you want us to be aware of for next meeting?
Thank you.
I just had a really quick question.
Yes.
And this is to you, Vice Mayor, and to Director Darby. It's access under the staffing updates. Last year was my understanding in the budget that we put money for a lobbyist position. Or what is going to be the process to hire that lobbyist? Are y'all interviewing people? If somebody's interested in that position, what do they need to do?
So I am hoping to send y'all a kind of separate update on that. I have started to have some preliminary meetings and conversations just to kind of understand what I need to be thinking about, right? So in speaking with our folks in the Davidson County delegation, kind of getting their perspective on our former lobbying efforts, folks that they might recommend. Also, because the mayor's office is tracking just a little bit behind us, we don't want to be kind of cross purposes with how they're going to approach this effort. So I was hoping to have a little more information on that today and put that on the agenda. But yes, I'm very mindful of that. We do have a separate budgeted lobbyist position in our budget, and we will absolutely be conferring with you all. I would imagine we may need to do kind of a specially called executive committee, subcommittee to discuss that. But I need more information kind of from mayor's office. I need to have a few more meetings myself. And then I will absolutely be in communication with you all about that because that is a very important decision, and the legislative session is coming up fast. Thank you. Any other business, anything you all want to be on our next agenda aside from the lobbyist matter? Okay, as always, I welcome your feedback and your suggestions, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.